All right, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll get started where everyone else does. As far as earliest childhood memories, what are we getting into?
The earliest childhood memory I have is my babysitter force feeding me split pea soup.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And then the next memory after that is me throwing it up on my mom when she came to pick me up.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if that in any ways could be an enticing flavor, but I just don't see it happening.
No, nope.
So, did we get rid of that babysitter? What, did never see her again?
No, I mean, I think I continued not for very long, but and I don't know where it was in the like sequence, but that's just my first memory. Yeah.
Love that. I think I keep going back to it, but I believe it was preschool, and I was gluing my hands together in a closet because
Oh,
I wasn't allowed to do it in front, but I just like playing with the glue and then pulling it off my hands. And I think that was my earliest childhood memory. I keep trying to figure.
okay.
I get first grade and kindergarten, I get some memories from there, but the glue one, I
Okay.
feel like that's the earliest we're going back. Um,
Okay.
for you, we'll just say elementary school. What was the family situation like? Did you live in a big family, a small family, around your family?
So I lived in a pretty American typical family, two kids. So I was the oldest, or I am the oldest. I have a younger sister, my mom and dad. And then we lived pretty close, about 20 or so minutes from my grandparents, my cousins. On my mom's side, we didn't really do things with my dad's side of the family.
Okay. And then was this in the US? Was this somewhere else where?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It was it's south of Seattle, about 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. Was
Mhm.
it still as rainy then as it is now?
I mean, so it's funny because Seattle's not even one of the top 10 rainiest cities, but it's
Really?
gray a lot. Yeah, it is. It's
Okay.
not, but it's just got that reputation because it's gray. It actually rains more in Portland than it does in Seattle.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So with the location, did you guys do a lot of hiking? Did you do a lot of outdoor stuff? What was
No.
the no?
My mom did not like outdoor stuff. No, so we never went, we hardly ever went outdoors.
So
Didn't
then
camp, didn't fish, none of it.
really, so what
Really.
was your mother's best way to distract you guys as kids?
We did a lot of work. Like my parents worked a lot and they
Okay.
owned their own businesses. So a lot of it was like my dad was would do like stuff for his business, and we would have to put this is like shows how old I am. We'd have to put like the labels, the mailing labels of these flyers for conferences that he would like speak at, like
Okay.
to put it like bulk, like thousands of them. So we spent a lot of time,
Man.
like child labor. And then also sports. We did a lot of,
Okay.
I played, so up until I was 10, I was in competitive gymnastics. And so I was in the
Oof.
gym like 3 hours every day after school, all weekend long. Like it was intense.
Would you say so? Obviously, you saw our 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Would you say it was worth it? And did you get burnt out, or what was your scenario?
Yeah. I developed an eating disorder or
Okay,
disordered eating
great,
from it.
great.
So it's a tough world, but I also played soccer. And
Okay,
so I ended up leaving gymnastics to go to pursue soccer. Um, American sports are intense. We live in Germany, and my
okay,
son is very involved in like German football, soccer, and they just do it differently here.
yeah,
It's more community based. Like it's definitely competitive, but it's not like insanity like it
yeah,
was like in the States. Yeah.
yeah. Well, a couple different points on that, but I was watching a reel yesterday, and it was talking about the cost of sports, and it was like an average of 65 to $70,000 for most sports, upwards to a quarter million when you got to like hockey or lacrosse and
Uh,
stuff like that. But for you growing up, so we touched on it a little bit for gymnastics.
mhm.
What was so intense about gymnastics that it got you to where you thought that not eating or the eating disorder was the step?
Because my coach at the time said to me, you need to lose weight. Like you need to record everything that you're eating. And I was 10.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
was this a Russian coach by any chance?
no, he was an American. He was actually from
Really?
New York. Yeah, he was an American male. Yeah.
Interesting.
hmm hmm
Because I the primarily I'm awful with names, but whatever Russian coaches I know it was like a family that came over here and then they held a lot of camps and then they had coaches come from them and it was mostly rigid. You need to do
Oh,
this
yeah.
and this, break the children. We don't
Yes.
want them eating so they don't hit puberty so that they can stay
Yeah.
in shape for a
Yep.
long enough time. Um,
Yeah.
what would you have needed um not necessarily in your corner, but what would have swayed
hmm
you away from, hey, maybe this is not a good idea?
What's not doing gymnastics or
Well,
like,
sorry, when he said, "Hey, you should lose weight," like
yeah.
what would have needed to be there to be like, maybe this guy doesn't know everything.
A parent that stepped in
Okay.
and said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, yeah.
And was this a coach that was like, "Hey, this is going to be how you get to the Olympics"? Were they promising something, or what was he pushing for?
No, no, it was just like this is what's expected. Like if you want to be competitive, like you need to be a certain size and
Yeah.
you're not that size. So you need to fix that.
That's wild. How did you deal
Yeah.
with that when, well, we heard how you dealt with it, but when you were first told that, what was going through your head?
Oh, I was so embarrassed and ashamed. Like
Yeah.
I just remember feeling, yeah, like just humiliated and like there was something wrong with me. And one of my memories, I remember opening the fridge and staring at the food inside and thinking, anything I eat, I have to write down.
Yeah.
So I have to be really like, am I okay to eat this? Should I
Right.
not eat this? And then really like having a very like tug of war relationship with food. My parents didn't eat healthily. It was very, your typical 80s, 90s, like low sugar, low fat, or no, not low sugar, sorry, low fat or fat free, but like
Yeah.
lots of processed, gross, all that stuff. And just not, I mean, they did the best with what they could. And my dad was a college football player. So, and he was a marathon runner. So for him, he was just like, oh, you eat what you want and you just work it off and then you're
Right.
in shape and everything's fine. And obviously that was not the case for me. So,
Well, I think it was a weird transition for our parents because processed food had just gotten into the mix and it
yeah.
was quick as well. So it's like, oh,
Oh, yes.
I don't have to prepare this. Like I don't have to thaw it out and spend the next hour or two making this. It's got
Yeah.
to because at that point there had been not really food that was bad for us that was disguised. You
Right.
pretty much knew, okay, this is candy, this is cake, this is whatever, very clear. But then when we
Yeah.
started getting into the processed meals, it's like, oh, what
Yeah.
do you mean this is not good for me?
Right. Why would this be bad? Like they're telling me that it's healthy choice or
Right.
whatever.
Um, for kind of hammering it a little bit for people that are listening or if they have kids,
Yeah.
were there girls that you could talk with? Were there other girls that were going through the same thing? What was the process for you?
I think I really, around that time in my friendships, I noticed that there was started to be a shift into like, she's my competition.
Oh,
So it was more like competition for attention from boys, competition for school, like who's better, like in grades.
yeah.
I think it definitely didn't help because my dad was very competitive and had like one of the things he told us throughout our childhood, because he had a very terrible, unsafe childhood, was that you can't trust anybody. Can't
Okay.
trust anybody.
Shit.
And so for me, that was something that like of course, applied to female friendships.
Yeah.
So I would never share too intimately. I was always proud that like, oh, I didn't cry. Like something sad happened and I was like, oh, I didn't cry. And I was tough and didn't show emotion and I didn't need anybody. And so, yeah, I would never share something that would make me appear weak to
Yeah.
somebody else.
That's a tough combo going into a
Yeah,
situation
I
like
know.
that.
Thanks,
So
Dad. Set me up for success. All right.
we've made it. We've made it.
Yeah.
So we get to 10 years old, and
Mhm.
the option comes up for gymnastics and soccer. How did you decide
Mhm.
that you were just going to move on with soccer?
It was more feasible for my family. Like
Yeah.
the hours at the gym were just like gruesome, like all day,
Yeah.
all like you just I would have had to only pick that.
Okay.
And whereas soccer, it allowed me to be more social. I think my parents liked that too because they were friends with some of the people that
Okay.
their parents that I played soccer with. And
Yeah.
it was more like social. And then it also allowed me to like play basketball and
Mhm.
some like do karate and horseback riding and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the gymnastics path was like all consuming.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, was there any highs or what was the best part of gymnastics for you before we move off of that topic?
I would say finding my strength. Like
Okay.
that was something I like looking back now, I was like, damn, I was strong. Like I was flexible, like I was so in tune with my body and
Yeah.
it was really powerful. And that was something I was like I could do push-ups, I could do like I was maxing out like the presidential fitness
Oh
things
yeah.
in school.
I
Like
couldn't
I
even
was
do a
like
pull-up.
oh my gosh, I crushed it. I mean, and so being so proud of what my body could do, like that was something because of gymnastics.
Yeah, that's exciting. So
Yeah.
when we were going through, we'll say to up to 10 again, did you
Mhm.
enjoy school, the learning or any
Oh, loved
academics?
it.
Yeah.
I was one of those kids that asked for more homework. I loved school. I loved learning. I still love learning, but I
Yeah.
absolutely loved learning. Yeah.
So do you think it was something that you just thirsted for and you don't know where it came from, or was there an introduction to this is going to be what I liked?
I think I was good at it, and
Okay.
so I got praised for it, which was interesting. I grew up in a very conservative Christian house and community, and so being a girl in a Christian school who's smart and articulate and outgoing and very talkative is not always welcomed.
Yeah.
So I had to walk that fine line of being like, oh, okay, well, I can't raise my hand too much, or I can't be too assertive, or I can't be too much of a leader because then I'm bossy. But if the boys did it, then it would be, a more admirable thing.
How does that message get across to you? Like at what point do you kind of get let know that this may not necessarily be your place as an equal?
I think seeing the roles.
Okay.
So in church, there was no women in leadership.
Mhm.
At this school, all the teachers were female. So any positions of power were really like held by men.
Okay.
Um, most of my mom, like all my mom's, like my parents' friends, like none of them had high power or most of them stayed at home. Some of them worked at the school. Some of them
Yeah.
just kind of took more menial jobs. And so there were definitely, I wouldn't say at that age in elementary that it was overtly said, but it was more of like when I look around and this is what I see.
Gotcha. So what was there not I guess that since the teachers were female, did they also try to put you into that box and like, hey, let's let the boys succeed, or did they highlight that you were doing well?
I think that they did a good job of highlighting that I did well, but then they a lot of times would default to the boy that was like I remember there was a boy that we would always compete against each other because we
Yeah.
were both like the smartest in the class, and it sometimes it felt like he was more favored or like allowed to be like put in charge or the leader
Yeah.
because he was a boy, or
Yeah.
his behavior was like he was athletic and uh not abrasive's not the right word. I would say assertive.
Okay.
And whereas it was praised, whereas for me it was like that's not what ladies like that's not how ladies talk or that's not how ladies do. Or I
Yeah.
remember one time I wanted to go out and play football with the boys and they looked at me like, what are you doing here? Like I watched football every Sunday with my dad. Like I
Yeah.
knew the rules, I knew like all of it. I loved it. And so I just it felt like girls only belong in certain like go go play with them while they go talk and do all those things. And like we're doing the rough and tough stuff over here.
Yeah. Did you feel like when you started playing soccer and more of a team sport that you got along with girls better, or do you feel like what your dad said still kept you on defense?
Oh no, no, I still kept it on defense. I think I didn't know I was a natural leader, but then I didn't because I was so insecure about who I wasn't great about lifting the people around me up
Okay.
because I was afraid that if I highlighted them and like acted like I needed them or appreciated them too much,
Yeah.
then that would show weakness. And I needed to maintain this like stoic, uh, strong persona.
Yeah. And was that message from your dad a single sentence that he told you? Was it more just like a culture of what he preached? Where do you feel like that came from?
Um, I would say it was probably by example. Like
Okay.
I never saw my parents cry or show too much emotion. I mean, they were very loving and supportive, but when it came to like showing weakness,
Yeah.
like crying or it was like you just suck it up and you persevere and you just keep going and you don't talk about it. So I would say that. I would say that he was very adamant though about you can't trust anybody and almost like people are like at any moment could betray you. And so
Yeah.
you can't rely on anybody else. So it's best to do it all yourself and not have to like include other people unless you absolutely have to. So you need to be the best. Like he
Yeah.
would tell me that, like, be the best.
Did have you ever talked to him since about that? Like, hey, do you feel like this was the right call, or why did you get that perspective? Did that conversation ever happen?
No, I mean, I knew why it happened because in his mind, had such an volatile, unsafe childhood,
Right.
and the world was so scary to him that that was the way that he thought you navigate through life with the
Okay.
tools that he had. So he thought, like, yeah, of course, this makes sense. Like, this is how you protect yourself.
Hmm.
The, she's eventually, inevitably going to get hurt because the world is a painful place.
Right.
So, because of his worldview, it made sense to equip me with the tools that he did.
Okay. So then moving past where we're in soccer, we're moving along as far as high school
Okay.
went. Did you guys go on many vacations? What did you look forward to when you were going into high school with a little bit more freedom?
I didn't have a lot more freedom in
Oh
high school,
no.
I would say. My parents were very strict.
Okay.
And I went to a Christian school. So like you had to sign a code of conduct. There was
Okay.
no drinking, no smoking, no sex outside of marriage. You could get expelled from school for that. And because I knew like I wanted to go to college, I thought I
Yeah.
wanted to be a lawyer. So I was a very serious student. I was a very dedicated athlete. We would go on vacations to nice places like Hawaii, Florida, California, a lot of places that my dad would have conferences.
Yeah.
And so then we would like make a family kind of trip out of it or do stuff like little road trips to like the Oregon coast or something
Okay.
like that. Hmm.
What was your favorite memory or favorite thing you like to do on vacations?
I love to go swimming, which is weird because
Okay.
I hate swimming now. I don't like being wet. I don't like the smell of chlorine. Like, it's so gross. But there was so much freedom in the pool,
Okay.
like the ability to move, and um, that was that was fun. I remember feeling like just free and fun in the pool.
Yeah, I find it so funny now because when I go on vacations and my parents are there, uh, I'd say one of the more enjoyable parts is when we're playing cards and we can do that at home, but
Oh yeah,
it's just we actually are sitting down. There's not a bunch of stuff going on. There's no rush. We
yeah,
don't have to leave or whatever it is. The kids are
yeah,
actually asleep. And I'm always looking for like, hey, what did you guys enjoy? And then for my
yeah,
daughter, she's like, oh, we saw a magician. I'm like, that was some dude for 45 minutes of the whole week we were there.
yeah,
But you loved what you loved.
yeah. It's
Um,
true. Yeah.
so as far as I had a good question. Traveling. Oh, the code of conduct. Um,
Mm.
so you were following it to the T, similar to I didn't get into anything when I was in high school. Were there people that you went to school with that were getting into drugs, sex, and all those things, and you were just staying away from it?
I would say that there was a couple of older classmen that I went to a really small school. There was only 33 in my class.
33.
So
That is a
33
small
people.
school.
Yeah, it's so everybody kind of already knew everybody's business. And so
Okay.
like you either played sports or you were kind of like the weird kids.
Yeah.
And so like all of our friends that played sports like didn't drink or didn't do drugs. I think maybe some of the boys like had sex with their, but I didn't like care because I wasn't interested in them sexually
Right.
anyways. So
Oh, that's good. I think when I was playing sports, I was like, oh, I don't want to go to parties because it might ruin whatever it is. But I was on the B or C team, so it really didn't matter
oh yeah.
for my athletic prowess at that time. So when the opportunity of college is coming up, do you have
Mm,
scholarships? Do you have a specific place that your school likes to funnel people to? What did that look like?
yeah. Mm-mm. No, so I knew I wanted to go someplace I could play soccer, but that was a Christian school, but not strict. Like we couldn't even dance at our school. Like there was no dancing. They like prom, it was like a dinner. There was no
Okay.
dancing. And so I wanted somewhere that had football because my school was too small to have football and that you could dance.
Okay.
And so I found a school in Eastern Washington called Whitworth College and yeah, ended up going there.
So as far as the Christian portion of the school, how was that placed into the schooling system? Did you have to pray a certain time? Did you have a class that was just Christianity, or how was that put
Sure.
into schooling?
So it's one of the more liberal Christian schools in the nation. At least it was. I'm not really sure like where it falls now, but you didn't have to sign a code of conduct. You didn't even have to be a Christian to go there. There was certain classes that were required, but no chapel was required. There was like a worldview class, but it was never like you have to believe this. It was like
Yeah,
discussing the different aspects of different faiths and
yeah,
Christianity being one of them. But I loved that approach to Christianity and how it was very evident, and there were a lot of conservative people there, but there was like, I remember I met my first like openly gay person in
yeah,
college and was like, and they identified as Christian, and that like blew my mind.
yeah.
I was like, what? How is that possible? So, yeah, I'm so grateful to have gone there. I met my husband there. It was a phenomenal education. I don't regret it for a second.
How did your faith develop from high school to college? As far as were you just following what everybody told you? You never really questioned it, or what was your faith like?
So one of the things that my dad, other than I told me to never trust anybody, was to be a critical thinker. And
Okay,
so that was something that
we
he
like that.
really instilled in us is I want you and never like always ask hard questions, never be
Okay.
afraid to ask the hard questions. So I was one of those kids. I was a very good student, but I asked a lot of questions because I really wanted to understand. And so my faith to me felt it was a choice. It wasn't like, oh, just because you grew up this way. And so in college, I started to expand what that looked like because my circle was so small in high school.
Yeah,
Even though I was friends with a lot of kids from different denominations, it was still pretty much your evangelical blend of Christianity. And so then in college, I started to meet people who are more mainstream
okay.
and they were less evangelical and they saw the Bible differently. And I was like, okay, wow. Okay, this is a lot.
So when you're talking to somebody that sees the Bible differently, do you go into
Mhm.
a discussion just to learn, or to be like, hey, this is what it is, that like why do you like you're wrong? This is what it says.
Um, I would say it was probably discussion based, but
Okay.
then I also had my convictions. Um, I really sought to like one of the things I value in myself is the ability to try to understand a person's perspective.
Yeah.
So as long as they're able to articulate their argument well, like I will like have a good open discussion. And I'm sure that there were times where I was trying to convince somebody to
Yeah.
like believe what I believed. But I really enjoyed and still enjoy having those open types of discussions.
That's fantastic. So in college, was there a specific major that Whitmore did well in, or what was your direction that
Whitworth.
Whitworth? Dang it, so close.
It's
Do I
okay.
cry?
It's okay. They were really known for teaching, like
Okay,
producing teachers, and I did not want to be a teacher. I was pre-law. I was a poli-sci major and really had every aspiration to go to law school.
yeah. And then what path did you take?
And then in my sophomore year, I think it was, I took a gender politics and law class and I read The Women's Room, and it totally changed my life.
Uh-oh.
And I really started to see how marriage was honestly a death sentence for a lot of women. Placed back in like the 1960s or 50s or whatever.
Yeah,
And so these incredibly intelligent women were like, I have no choice but to get married because I can't open a bank account. I can't have a credit card. I can't have like their sexual safety depended on men,
yeah.
having a men protect them and not being, up for grabs. And so I started to look at the messages that the church was sending women about sexuality and was like, I need to do something about this. So I was like, I'm not going to study law. I'm going to study sex.
So was there a certain paragraph? Was there a certain chapter that's like, hey, like this is where it is, or it was just throughout the whole book? Somebody, this is wrong, something should be done, something should be done. I'm gonna do what needs to be done, or where,
I
what
don't remember. I still have the book. Like it's 25 years old. It's over on my bookshelf because I want it to remind me of like that something, especially as an author myself, that like
yeah,
the word can be so powerful and transformative that
yes,
and you just have no idea. So it's both an inspiration and a reminder to me.
that's phenomenal. So
Yeah.
not to do the book disservice, but what was well, I would say maybe 50 to 70, maybe that's too 75 years ago, like for a woman to do anything on her own was very tough. And we're in
Oh
a
yeah,
relatively new age of getting
sure.
close to that. What did the book bring out? Was it any stats or anything like that to kind of
No, it's
summarize?
just a novel. It's a novel. It's
Okay.
just about this woman's journey through marriage and motherhood and just how miserable she was. And just like how you just think that your life is supposed to go a certain way and it doesn't. And
Yeah.
then you're like, is this it? Like I did all the right things and then I don't feel fulfilled. But
Yeah. I remember my mom, she was in marketing and sales, and she said her goal was to either gross $1 million in sales because she did a lot of sales. And then she said, and then I got pregnant and then my priorities changed.
mm,
She has since run a couple companies, so things worked out, but
yeah.
for you, what direction? So you immediately said, "Hey, I want to start learning about sex or the implications, or what direction did you head?"
It was more like sexuality. So
Sexuality.
it was like the messaging that we're talking and like the culture around sexuality. I was really drawn to psychology, but my weak spot was like research and science, like science. I had zero interest in doing any type of research, and I knew that if I pursued a psychology path, I'd have to do some type of research. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. Um, so I finished, and I was too far in my credits to switch majors. So I finished with like my bachelor's in political studies and then like a minor in sociology or something, and got into graduate school, a sociology graduate program, and hated it for the because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do,
Right.
and this was before internet times. So like schools had brochures, and it was really just kind of like word of mouth.
Yeah.
And so my husband had applied to medical school. I got married my senior year of college because sex outside of marriage is wrong.
Hmm.
And I knew that my husband, he was applying to med schools and I couldn't move across the country with him if we weren't married
Okay.
because my family would have just lost it. And been shamed and everything. So we got married my senior year of college and
Is that how he proposed to you? He said your family is. Going to shame you if
You're stuck with me because of this. No. I mean, it was the whole like fall in love. It was, I
Yeah.
mean, yes, it was, I don't want to downplay it. Like I did very much love him and I wanted, right? I wanted the Disney fairy tale of, and I was promised like, hey, if I save myself for marriage, God's going to bless me with an amazing sex life and it's going to be great. And so I was like, yeah, let's do this. Yeah.
So,
hmm
um, how was your physical and mental health at this point while going through and finishing up college?
So after well, he was my fiance then, proposed to me, I had a panic attack. Like
Okay.
not that day, but like a few days before. Like I was convinced he lived in Boise and I lived in Seattle, but we both went to college together. And on my flight back to from Boise, I thought I was going to die on the plane. Like I was so, and then I actually had to take a break. We have like what's called Jan term. So you go to school for like 3.5 weeks and you just take one class
Oh,
for
cool.
3 hours a day. And that's where a lot of people will do study abroad. Like my
Gotcha.
sophomore year, I studied abroad for like 3.5 weeks in Europe. But I couldn't go to class. Like I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. My anxiety was like off the charts.
Now that's a full-on anxiety attack. I feel like
Yes,
you did it.
I did. Yeah, I sure did. Like I would walk into my bedroom. I lived with two other girls off campus, and I walked in and I would see my bed, and my heart would start racing because I'd be like, I can't sleep. Like, and I know when I get into bed, I need to sleep, but my body can't sleep. And then I just like the looping thoughts, and yeah, it was awful.
What were the looping thoughts? Were you worried that you were going to be married with one person, the sex, or just anything in general?
No, it wasn't actually related. Well, I don't think it was consciously related to anything. It was just like this is a big decision. There's so much
Gotcha.
pressure. Like I was in student government and so I was like running for student body president. Like I was very I don't know, I guess popular is the right word in college. So like a lot of people knew me. I was really involved. It felt like there was so much on my plate. And then now like I'm like following the right footsteps, right? Like you get your MRS degree and then you graduate and then you are this wonderful wife and I'm going to be married to a doctor someday. And like, I think I didn't have the cognitive awareness then to understand like that's a lot of pressure for a 20-year-old.
Yeah. So then what changed? Or how long did that last?
I started medicine. Like
Okay.
I went and talked to my parents about it and was like, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I had to withdraw from school for that 3.5 weeks. And my dad was like, oh, I've struggled with mental health my whole life. And like, I've been suicidal a few times. And I was like, geez, that would have been nice to know because I felt like I was
Thanks,
alone.
Dad.
Like I had no idea,
Yeah,
absolutely no idea. So I went to the doctor and they put me on anti-anxiety meds, and that was life-changing.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So then did you move to I already forgot where you said you were moving. You're moving.
Indiana.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep. We moved to Indiana. So he got waitlisted, but I got into graduate school. So he worked at a hospital and then got into med school in the meantime. And then I started the program, hated it, and then ended up transferring to a program in Pennsylvania that was like a distance learning where I would
Okay.
fly there like once or twice a month and do like 18 hours of school. Saturday, like 10 hours on Sunday, 8 hours on Sunday. Yeah.
Woo! Hey, that sounds like it's an option and you took it.
Yeah.
And
It was.
what was that schooling for?
It was a master's in education and human sexuality.
Okay. That seems
Yeah.
like a very specific route. So you
Yes, it is. Yep.
so you found what you wanted.
Yes, I found what I wanted, but I found myself drawn to the PsyD students, which is a doctorate of psychology. Like I really wanted to, but then I was like, they don't do that distance learning. Like I'm already so far in debt. Like I gotta this is my path. Like I'm gonna get this master's degree and then go and work. And I did. And then I ended up going back to school and got another master's in mental health counseling because I found that I really did want to work with clients one on one.
And do you feel like the master's was more of a piece of paper, or did you really learn some things that was very helpful in
Oh, absolutely. No, it was super helpful. I mean, there were so many things about the world that I had no idea existed outside of, like because so many of the people, like I had several transgender like classmates. I
Yeah.
had people who were like there was an Orthodox Jew in there who
Okay.
like would talk about what it was. All of these people who worked in some capacity in the sexuality field, and it
Yeah.
was so broad and diverse. Non-monogamy. That was my first exposure to non-monogamy. I just was like, whoa, this life is way more like bold and like broad than I had any idea about.
So when you're working, what type of clients were you dealing with after that master's program?
Um, so after my first master's, I was just working as a sexuality educator. So I worked with a lot of high risk populations, juvenile detention centers, because in Indiana, it's abstinence only in the schools. So I'd go and teach to like college students, um, just any type of group that was looking to learn more about sexuality, reproduction, you know, I would do that and then realize like, well, I'm not going to make any money in this. And
Mhm.
then two, I really felt a call because people would come up to me afterwards and ask me very specific, intimate questions. And I was like, ethically, I can't help them. Like, I mean, I
Gotcha.
could, but like, I'm not doing this. There's needs to be more education here.
What was your most effective, I'll just say, marketing tool in apps, how to tell kids not to have sex?
Mm, most effective. I don't think I ever told kids not to have sex
Well,
directly. I would say like to delay it until you're ready, but like most people, like 9 out of 10 people end up having, or it's even higher than that, probably 95% of people have sex at some point in their life. So that's like not a very helpful message.
well, so you said in Indiana it was what was
Abstinence only.
abstinence only. So what was your
Right.
best way to get that message across?
Well, I wasn't allowed in the schools because we wouldn't teach abstinence only. We taught medically
Oh,
accurate, comprehensive um, sex
gotcha.
eds. Yeah, so I wasn't welcome there.
I thought they were bringing you in to
Mm.
instruct how to do abstinence only. Okay, that's why that other question didn't work.
Okay, yeah. I was like, I don't understand. Like, I mean, obviously be abstinent until you're ready. I would never tell somebody just go have sex. Like, great,
Right.
have a great time. Like it's like being responsible and being aware of what you're capable of. But I think that we do a disservice to kids if we, and when I say kids, we're talking, age appropriate,
Yeah.
that we do a disservice if we're not like equipping them with things like consent,
Yeah.
understanding how their bodies work, those kind of things.
So you are getting questions after class, and then you go into the next stage of your life. Where does that bring us for the one-on-one clients?
Yep. So I had my first kiddo, then our second daughter, and then finished my second master's, and then opened up my own mental health and sex therapy practice,
Okay.
and would see predominantly women who struggled with anxiety and depression, and then I would work with couples who had typically mismatched sexual desires or were struggling after infidelity.
And was there oh, I'll ask this a better way. So usually when you when you go into the ER, the doctor's office,
Mhm.
a majority of the time you go in for something, they've seen it 97, 98% of the time. They're like, "Oh, this is
Right.
just the usual." What was the usual for you?
The usual for me was the depression and anxiety in women who
Okay.
were overworked, exhausted, like feeling like they're not enough, unresolved childhood trauma. I had one woman who was physically abused by her husband, but that was not, I would say, typical. Lots of like poor communication, just lacking skills of how to set boundaries,
Yeah.
how to communicate your needs, believing that you deserve like whatever it is that you're wanting.
Hmm. And then is this more is this the you give them the book answer? How do you come up with responses as far as when these problems come up?
What do you mean?
So someone comes in and says, "Hey, my
Hmm.
sex drive is very low. My husband's sex drive is very high.
Hmm.
Was there a section in your class I was like, hey, this is exactly what you need to do, or how would you mold a response? Because I feel like psychology is so hard because it's not like a dietary type of situation with, oh, you have low calcium or low
Right.
iron, but
Yeah.
no, just a little supplement of this, a little bit of this.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't understand when it comes to therapy is that there's different modalities or different methods
Hmm.
of treating, I'm using that in quotes, treating something or someone, their
Yeah.
issues. And so, depending on the modality and the way that you see the brain, the way that you
Yeah.
see the mind, the way like that will impact your what you prescribe. So when I was in graduate school, the gold standard was cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, they're all interlinked. If you want to change your behavior, you change your thoughts. And then it like goes from there. I am since not the biggest fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. I think that it is I prefer internal family systems.
Okay.
And that's hands down my favorite approach to therapy. But yeah.
Why is that you chose not the thoughts first?
Because it limits, well, one, it doesn't address the mind-body connection.
Okay.
Most cognitive behavioral, it's like just think your way out of it. Like you're just gonna think your way, and it totally ignores the power of the subconscious and the power of the body.
Hmm. So then, how did you find the new process that you went with?
Well, there's a few things. First, I got burned out. I was like, my clients are not really getting the results that I know that they can get. Like
Yeah.
they're white knuckling a lot of this and like the results aren't lasting. And so that led me to explore EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I liked that one a little bit more, but, and then I had my son. And so then I took a break from therapy and had a
Yeah.
newborn, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we moved for my husband's residency to Texas. Not, t I'm sorry, his fellowship. And so I was at home and would do some speaking and consulting and started to like have my own personal development journey and started like to dabble in other modalities of like, oh, like motivational interviewing and like, understanding the role of the subconscious and those kind of things. And so then I realized like, man, maybe there's more to therapy than just like thinking your way into being, happy.
How did your therapy change or just your process change as you started having kids?
Um, I started to have a lot more perspective on, asking somebody to like journal or carve out some time for meditation when you have like little kids, like
Yeah.
newborn, 2-year-old, like it's not going to happen. Like, and my husband was incredibly unsupportive. He was like, I will go to work and come home and like eat and then that's pretty much it. Like he wasn't a good dad. He wasn't a good husband. Like he was so like I like to say that medicine was his wife and I was his mistress.
Yeah.
And so I was really on my own in a lot of things and I couldn't, as somebody with 2 master's degrees and lots of certifications, like I couldn't just make myself feel better. I couldn't
Yeah.
just make myself like less tired or more happy. So
And do you feel like that was at the start of kid one, two, or three, or that was it was more of just building?
no, which part?
Just the part where you couldn't make yourself happy or think your way out of it. Was after one, it was fairly
Oh,
easy,
it was
or
during my first pregnancy. Like I tried to go off my anxiety meds because I was like, oh, I'm gonna like have be not on drink coffee. I'm not gonna do any of this, like no medicine. And I was having like panic attacks every day that I was pregnant. I was just like, I would go to the bathroom and like expect to see blood. Like I
Mhm.
miscarried. I miscarried. Like I just was constantly thinking that over and over. And so I had to go back on the meds because I was like felt like I was going insane.
Yeah,
And so that's again when I was like, this is not so easy where you can just like think yourself into a happier place. And
yeah.
yeah.
So after the first one was a bit of a struggle, how did you decide on having two and three?
Um, that's a great question. I think it's one of those, gosh, I loved having like husband and myself, we both have siblings, and I think kids do better with siblings
Yeah.
in terms of like social skills. Now, if they grow up in a very robust community, it tends to be different, but like I find that I think that kids I just always knew that I wanted three kids.
Okay.
And I didn't care if they were boys or girls. I actually wanted all boys, but I once we had the two girls, we weren't like trying for a boy. It just
Yeah.
that we just happened to get a boy. But I think that's just how we saw our family. Like one of the best questions that somebody asked me one time is like when you close your eyes and you think of like 20, 25 years from now, like what do you see your kitchen table look like?
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, oh, this is what it looks like this amount of people or this type of vibe or whatever. And so to me, it just felt like, yeah, okay, do this.
Yeah. So we'll get into the book portion in a moment, but what was your physical health while going through your pregnancies?
I gained can I swear? Sorry.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. I gained a shit ton of weight. I gained
Okay.
like almost 60 pounds with my
Mhm.
first one. And I was already a little bit overweight, just slightly at the beginning of my pregnancy. Because I was just so lonely. Like
Yeah.
my husband was in med school, he was never around. I was working, but like I pretty much just kind of worked on my own because we would go out to different places by ourselves. All of our friends were in med school. The closest friend I had, she was a lawyer and her boyfriend was a med student. And
Yeah.
so everybody was always working and doing the things. And so I was just alone and food was my comfort. And so I was really, really overweight and uncomfortable. And then this is so naive, but I literally thought like, oh, I'm going to have the baby and I will this weight will just like melt off of me like it does in the magazines, right? You see these women who look, and I know that that sounds insane, like saying that out loud, but
Yeah.
when you're in it, I had no idea. I didn't have any pregnant friends. Like I was 24 when I got pregnant, or 25. So again, all of our friends most of them weren't even married. And
Yeah.
so I had no idea any of the pregnancy stuff. It was like all brand new to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So at what point did you think about writing a book?
Oh gosh. Probably, let's see, it's 8 years ago,
Okay.
maybe. I think when I had one of my coaches, my I think like around, yeah, about 7 years ago, she was like, you need to write a book. And I
Hmm.
was like, that do I? That seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And my dad actually wrote several books and was an expert in his field. So I was aware of like what that process was like. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that does not sound fun. I don't want to do that. But I was so tired of encountering women when the first thing that they would ask me is what's wrong with me or am I
Yeah.
broken?
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, screw it. I have to write it. Like it just one too many pushed me over and was like, okay, like I want women to understand why they feel so disconnected from their bodies and why they're just not interested in sex.
Yeah. Well, I would feel so at the beginning of my wife's and I relationship, we would have sex all the time, and she had since become a social media influencer.
Mm,
So there was never really a turning it off type of situation as far as working. So I feel like
mm,
that's very tough for her. And and I used to work at 80 or 100 hours a week, so there
mm.
wasn't, I mean, obviously I had enough energy that we would have sex a lot,
Sure.
but since now I'm a stay-at-home dad, I have a lot more free time where she does not. So our
Yeah.
they don't line up as much as it used to, and I think it's very tough for her, like you said, like
Yeah.
how do you say is there something wrong with me? Is it hormonally? And that's
Yeah.
something that we work through, and I would say our communication is fairly good, but there's been some of the times where it's like, hey, come on, what's going on? How do we
Yep.
communicate about this? And
Yep.
he didn't really have a communication household where I'm
Mm,
like, we just talk about things and then they get better.
Yeah, right. Magic. Yeah.
So when writing this book, how did you break it down for women that like it's okay, you are where you are?
Yeah, I didn't want like another like rich white lady to like come in and be like, okay, like this is what's wrong with it. Good luck. You know, like I didn't want to be one of those like self-help
Yeah,
annoying people. Like I really wanted to give them tools and like through the whole process and meet them where they were at.
yeah,
And so the book is divided into three parts. The first part is like, why do we even have a book about women not being interested in sex? Like where does that even come from? And then the second part is really and looking at like historical,
yeah.
generational trauma, religious impacts, those kind of things. The second part is really like, okay, like let's kind of connect with our body and figure out like what's going on and like understanding sexual arousal and like that cycle and desire. And then the last part is really, okay, like here are some tools and what we can do about it collectively and individually.
Words are easy for me. I would say I read a lot of self-help books, and
Hmm.
the problem with me is I'd be like, oh, like I just crushed this book. Usually you can tell what type of book
Oh
I'm
yeah.
reading because that's what I'm talking about that month. How
Hmm.
do you work on implementing those things, and then how do you know when to go to the next step?
Yeah, I think one of the how do I explain this? Books are tools,
Yeah.
but they are not the journey.
Okay.
And I think that we want them to be the journey from start to finish. Like we want it to be as easy as I start here and I end here and now I'm better.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, right. I do too. I'm like, oh man, can you solve my life problems in this? And one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was, yes, so that women were like, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. But I also wanted it to be a conversation starter so that women could have it with their partners. Like I have had so
Yeah.
many men read this book and who have been like, oh my gosh, I had no idea women experience this kind of body shame or this kind of like whatever, you know? And I wanted it to be a book that women could talk about in a book club as a group. Like, oh my gosh, you feel that way too? Like, this is what I'm doing. And like to have them brainstorm, like to use it as a springboard
Yeah.
to go out of. So, yeah. So to answer your question, I have like tools for your toolbox at the end of each chapter.
I love
But
that.
if you hate sex, and I say this in the book in the introduction, if you hate sex, this book will not make you fall in love with it. Like you're not going to be like, oh, I cannot wait. I cannot wait
Yeah.
to go get it on. But it will help you think about it differently and think about your body differently and
Yeah.
about the messaging that we've received and how women have really been set up to fail.
Do you think the hate sex is universal, as in like it doesn't feel good, or you don't dread it, or it's not enjoyable? What would be not necessarily a better definition of I hate sex, but what do you feel like it usually gets broken down to?
I think it's exhausting. It is
Okay.
another thing on the to-do list. It is women are doing it to check a box
Okay.
because you know, a lot of my female friends, like they really enjoy a smutty book
Hmm.
and they really are sexual vixens. Like they
Yeah.
are, I'm like, damn, you guys are into way more things than I am. Like I'm boring. I'm a trained sex therapist. But their partners don't want to put the effort. They're like, we're married, same old, kind of do the same old routine. And they're not seducing them. Like their male partners aren't romanticizing. No, what's the word when you like
Foreplay?
moves? Yeah, foreplay. There's not a whole lot of foreplay going on here. And women are already tired. We are
Okay.
already like carrying such a heavy mental load. Like the biggest boner killer for women is responsibility.
Hmm.
You want to turn a woman on, take away her responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of men don't know how to do that. They're going to go clean the attic or blow the leaves or
So, responsibility, do you mean responsibility in the household or turning her
everything,
on?
everything. No,
Everything.
responsibility in everything. Kids, doctor's appointments, aging parents, retirement, job stuff, PTA, bake sales, church, all of the things. that is not an equal load carried for most, not all, but a lot of the women out there.
I mean, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I would absolutely agree with you. Her list is still somehow way longer than mine.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course, like where does sex fit in there? No, it's not making it in the survival because it's not in the top 10 things of like what needs to get done. But if my husband starts to be crabby or I want something and I know that like, well, if I give him a little bit of sex and I can get this or I can push it off or whatever, right? Then they lay down, do the thing, move on.
That doesn't sound fun.
No, it does. It's not fun. It's not fun for anybody. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. It prevents, and again, I know that I'm painting, not all men are like this, not all marriages are like this, but a lot of the people that come to me are.
Yes.
And a lot of the people I talk to have this issue where and I get it because men are tired too. And so they're like, well, I don't want to freaking put out the effort too. Like I've already wined and dined you. I put a ring on your finger. Like what more do you want?
Yeah.
And women want connection, but a lot of men don't know how to do that. And a lot of women don't do a good job of advocating for that. And
Yeah.
so instead of taking the time to say, this is what I need, this is how I'll feel seen and loved and turned on and want to connect with you more, they don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I would say coming from the the other half, the men,
Sure.
uh the barrier is not set very high. So that
Oh,
like
it's not. No.
no, and for women, like you said, just recently they can now search for partners that they want instead of it's more of
Yes.
like a need and a safety type of situation.
But I would say, because I got married 20 years ago, I would say for me, especially since I grew up in a very religious culture, even though I'm very well educated and have a great job, like there's still that expectation to like, and that subconscious of like, yeah, but you need a man. Like you
Yeah.
still, and because my worth as a woman was tied to how men valued me. So the more valuable I was to men, the more valuable I am in society.
So is that an external thing or an internal thing?
I would say probably both. I mean, it's been more recently where I've like am aware of that. Like, holy shit! Like, I, I wanted to be valued by men because they were the ruling class. They
Yeah.
were the ones that gave you the up or the downer that said that you mattered. Like they were in all these positions of power in the places that I were. So like
Okay.
in church, in work,
Yeah.
I mean, those are pretty much the only two places I ever went, right? Church and work. And so men always held that power, and you
Yeah.
only had value when a man was like, oh, you're allowed to do this. You're good enough to do this. We'll promote you to this. And yeah.
So is that more of a feminist mentality? I'm trying to I don't like putting people in boxes.
Sure.
So you're saying you would like to have your own power with your husband, more of an equal of your husband.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yes, I am in my marriage because I want to be, not because I
Gotcha.
have to be. And I
Gotcha.
realize that that is a place of privilege. A lot of women still today are in their marriage out of like they are like, I would be destitute. I don't have an education. I don't have an income. Like I am here because this is really my best option.
So what do they do if that's where they're at and they're unhappy? What options do they have?
I think a lot of women distract and numb themselves. So
Okay.
they shop, they, read a lot of smutty books. They kind of just they drink, they eat. There's lots of different ways that women numb.
Hmm. So what have you gotten back as feedback from your book or some of the more memorable things that you're like, this was a good decision to do?
Oh gosh. I one of my favorite conversations that I had was with a woman who husband was like would read it before they went to bed together at night and she'd already read it. And he turned to her one night and said, "Do you hate your body?" And she was like, "What?" He's like, "Do you hate your body?" And she was like, "I don't hate it now, but I have for most of my life. Yeah. And he was like, but you birthed two beautiful babies. Like you're gorgeous. And she was like, yeah, but like I don't see like do you see the messaging that like he had no idea that for most of their marriage she hated her body and felt
Mm,
like awful about it. And that was such a beautiful conversation for them and a healing conversation for them, for him to just listen and understand.
yeah.
They would have never talked about that. Like, I mean, maybe something random, but like that intentional conversation about how he viewed her body and how she viewed it and how they were able to share, like that for me was like, okay, it's really worth it.
So for people, we have two more questions after this, but for people that want to
Okay,
find you, what's the name of your
sure.
book? Where would they find you?
Sure. So it's called Not Tonight, Honey, Why Women Actually Don't Want Sex and What We Can Do About It. And you can find me at Courtney Boyer Coaching.
Wonderful. So the last two questions that everyone gets, what's your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
Mm. I would say a robust way of living.
Ooh, I like that. And then what's
Yeah.
something from your life that you think people listening to the podcast would be able to take away as a positive?
Oh, I follow your desires. Like that was something that really, I thought that life was supposed to look a certain way, that you follow X to here and to here. And then as long as I jump through all of these hoops, I'm checking these boxes, I'm going to be so happy. And I wasn't happy until I tuned into who I was authentically and realized that maybe that's not what society tells me is happiness, and I'm okay with that. So, but when I look back, the breadcrumbs that led me here were those buried desires.
Awesome. I love that. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Athlete. And listen up, this could make a real difference. I've been using Vital Athlete Freeze Roll On for the last 6 months. I stopped using regular painkillers about 10 years ago because of the negative side effects on your liver and kidneys. Vital Athletes understands this. They've created a CBD roll-on specifically for pain and injury relief. Their Freeze Roll-On gives you fast-acting relief right where you need it, so you can keep going. If you care about getting the most out of every workout, then Vital Athlete is for you.